All right, go ahead.
Thank you. I hereby open the meeting of the Committee of Citizen Involvement. Could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Landon,
Present.
Vice Chair Salazar,
Present.
Commissioner Quavelo,
Here.
Commissioner Gill,
Present.
Commissioner Bergen is excused for the first part of this meeting, Commissioner McGinley,
Present.
and Commissioner Buck.
Present.
Thank you. I would like to ask members of the audience who are joining us by phone or online to please keep yourselves on mute until you are called on to provide public testimony. During the Planning Commission regular meeting at 7 this evening, we will have business from the audience, which is a time for anyone to speak to the Planning Commission on any subject that is not otherwise on our agenda for this evening. Call for the agenda item, Community Engagement Plan, please.
Good evening, committee members in this context and commissioners. Can everybody hear me okay?
Very well, thank you.
So just to start out, this project is one that staff have been looking forward to getting to for a while. So we're really excited to be here this evening. And I also want to mention that the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development awarded some grant funds for the work to us this past fall. And also that the Lane Council of Governments, or LCOG for short, helped us with the materials for your consideration this evening. They will be a key part of the project team throughout, and wanted to mention related to that, that we have Jacob Collister here tuning in from LCOG for part of the discussion and questions. But before that, I wanted to share a PowerPoint because this is the first time we've talked about the project in this way formally. So let me get that pulled up here. And just one, okay, there we go. So we are focusing this evening on how community members can participate and help us make sure the map that we end up with for this project makes practical and policy sense. I'd like to start by explaining what we're doing by describing the overall project first, and then summarize its community engagement elements. So this evening, to reiterate, we're seeking an action by the committee to approve the draft community engagement plan and also approve the future project advisory committee's bylaws as presented, or to approve them with revisions. Page 5 of your agenda packet sets the stage for the purpose of this project, but as an abbreviated purpose statement, this project will create a comprehensive plan map for Springfield so that the map shows the long-term vision for individual properties by showing property lines in relation to an existing comprehensive plan designation, for example, residential or commercial. This map will replace the existing comprehensive plan map Springfield uses, which is the portion of the Metro Plan diagram east of I-5. The Metro Plan shows planned land uses at a very, very general high level, but for the most part is not property specific. So here's an example of how information could look different by creating a property specific map through interpreting and clarifying the Metro Plan diagram. On the right here, let me get my cursor. On the right, you can see more detail about streets and property lines as compared to the current Metro Plan diagram with a little snippet of it on the left here. However, there isn't much difference between the plan designations as shown by the colors, and we'd like to propose to keep those. By doing that, people will have a way to see how individual properties are planned in Springfield with better confidence. The geographic scope of this project is to cover the areas within city limits and between city limits and Springfield's urban growth boundary. In our research so far, we found that the line or the border between each different designation, for example, between the pink and the yellow here, is about 300 feet wide. 300 feet can really cover a lot of properties in an urban context, especially. So there will be cases where we'll need to interpret the diagram to look into whether it makes sense to assign one color or another, or in some cases, a property might have more than one color or designation. So to summarize what this project does and doesn't do, this is a fact-finding project to interpret existing information. It's not a visioning project or a major overhaul of our comprehensive plan, but is an opportunity to resolve as many things that are unclear as possible, to solidify what's there, and to make sure the clarified map is useful and convenient. So why it matters. Adopting this property-specific comprehensive plan map for Springfield will bring us one step closer to creating an overall comprehensive plan just for Springfield. The map will become the visual part of our land use element or chapter. This next point is the most immediate and observable benefit. So imagine you're ready to build something home related, or you're going to start your dream business or agency, but you learned you need to know what land use parameters are in place before you can do it. For example, what the zoning is, and if it matches the plan designation, which is often required for land use approval before construction. You then go to research what your plan designation is online and can't find the answer because none of the maps show exactly where your property lines are. You then go to talk to someone at the planning department who also sees the same issue, which means they might need to research the property and may take several days to provide an answer if things aren't clear or straightforward from the outset. So the work to make the map for this project will ultimately resolve these situations and provide confidence in future decisions, because people will be able to use at their fingertips property research tools that are accurate, quick to access, and easy to use. And one of the last examples for now is that the map will also serve as a basis for determining how much of Springfield's residential land supply is buildable. This knowledge will feed into a foundational piece of Springfield's housing needs analysis, which Springfield needs to adopt by December 2025. We've made some progress on getting toward these outcomes, have done some research, and we'll walk you through the plan for our plan map. So to help with our assumptions in our research, late last year, the city project team kicked off and started gathering background resources, including coordination with City of Eugene, who's also working towards similar efforts. On to the next piece of work here, the draft materials before you this evening for task 2 put us in the midst of really focusing on how we'll communicate information about the project and on how we'll hear from others to guide the project team's work and ultimately our map product. I'll get more into this later on as the focus of this evening. The big lift to get moving on a draft map is also happening now with task 3. Our mapping team is gathering data to make the current PDF version of the Metro Plan diagram a version that's compatible with tax lot lines and at the correct scale. So we'll be blowing it up because really it's just an 11 by 17 PDF map at this point. The goal with this is to make sure the tax lot lines go on top of those colors on the Metro Plan diagram. And from there, we'll know how many properties we need to research to confirm their plan designation, just based on knowing that the line of a Metro Plan designation is about 300 feet wide, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of the research will involve looking to see if any previous land use decisions, including staff reports, documented a plan designation, which could give us a clue and even a written answer. And in addition to property research, an important part of the project will be to consider other questions and try to answer them to keep us moving forward. These questions are about key considerations for information display on the map with some policy implications. One is about whether to show the plan designations for public rights of way or not. And the example on the right, bottom right here, it shows what the plan map could look like if we don't designate rights of way. This display would differ somewhat from the current Metro Plan diagram because it doesn't depict rights of way to this level of detail. But another consideration is that Springfield zoning map shows zoning for public rights of way. So a related question could be, do these approaches to mapping need to match? Another would be to represent overlays, how to represent overlays like nodal development areas on the map. In some instances, they're outlined like you see in red here. and it's over an underlying or primary designation called an overlay, like you can see on the bottom part of this legend snapshot. You can also see higher up on the legend that nodal development in bright purple is also a base designation. And we're also interested in how to best display information about our adopted neighborhood refinement plans. For example, whether we should show outlines of the refinement plan diagrams on the comprehensive plan map, and if we do, what level of information to show within those outlines. So moving on to the next step after we get those questions answered, we'll have a public review draft version of the map to also provide feedback on those policy questions, and we'll start to identify plan amendments to prepare for adoption. And finally, we will adopt the property-specific comprehensive plan map as a legislative amendment process with Springfield's and Lane County's appointed and elected officials. So you might be able to tell this project is very focused up front and will be fairly fast overall, depending on how the property research and task 3 goes. This visual is just a quick visual of the pieces of the project where interacting with committees and the broader community to inform the draft map before adoption will occur. While the public can always provide testimony at a public hearing, our hope is that if we do a good enough job along the way before the hearings, people will understand what we're doing early on and will be interested throughout. So as I talk through some of the community engagement highlights, keep in mind the circles with the dotted outline show where the CCI and Planning Commission will participate or receive updates. So in task 2, that sets the stage for the successful outcomes of this project, and getting your input on the community engagement plan this evening is a critical first part of this task. From there, the project team will focus on recruiting a project advisory committee and forming a separate committee of agency staff, which we're calling the technical resource group. We're also working on developing a project webpage simultaneously and plan to have a basic framework on the page ready by the time we recruit for both groups. The recruitment for the project advisory committee will follow a public process, and we'll announce that recruitment in a variety of ways. Social media for one, on the city's website, we'll do a news release and have more ideas, and we intend to leave that recruitment window open for about a month or so. And moving on to our idea for the composition of that project advisory committee, we're thinking it'd be great to have it be made up of people who you could think about as a user group because of the focused nature of the project. So we're specifically thinking about looking for people who are familiar with land use planning, who work to provide main uses shown on the Metro Plan diagram, like housing and business services, anyone who has experience working with the Metro Plan, or thinking they'll one day work with the map if they haven't already, even if it's just for a specific property. And we'd like to have at least 5 committee members to provide balance of discussion and perspectives, but we also don't really need to limit the size so specifically that we can't bring on a couple more great committee members. Talking about their extent of involvement, we think the committee will meet at least twice, but it's more likely it'll be 3 or 4 times and up to 5. At its first meeting, we'll discuss its bylaws, and a draft of those is in your packet for review, as I mentioned, because we'd like to share them during the committee recruitment process. We will also revisit them again with the formed committee at its first meeting so that they can take ownership of them and make changes to the bylaws if they need to. The next task is the technical and research heavy mapping task I mentioned, where we'll research records like staff reports to determine plan designations we have questions about. And here, just related to community engagement, we'll have some opportunities to work with groups and individual property owners here. So for example, we'll plan on a couple meetings with our project advisory committee and our partner agency staff on the technical resource group. We'll then be able to follow this with sharing our progress and confirming direction on options for information display with Planning Commission and Council. And we also may need to contact property owners of the specific properties where we have questions and the border between 2 plan designations is somewhat unclear. And with them, we would just share what we found so far. The goal being that the direct outreach is to see if our understanding of the plan designation matches theirs so there aren't any surprises. And alongside all of this, we would use some of the continuous messaging strategies for progress updates, like the project webpage or e-updates. This next step is where we'll invite review of the draft map from the broader community using our various engagement strategies. We'll continue working with individual property owners as needed and with the project advisory committee and agency staff. Supporting the work on this step will be more community engagement tools. One being an interactive version of the draft map on the project webpage that will also function as a property lookup tool where people will be able to find the plan designation for their own property. We'll also create a PDF version to post on the webpage, and we'll also print paper versions of the map. An example where we might put a printed one could be near the Development Center office counter at City Hall. And we just realized working through this that having staff available at City Hall during office hours to provide information has been and it will be a tried and true resource for helping people, just because not everyone is electronically inclined, and having a person to talk to is really important face-to-face sometimes. We'll also plan on drop-in sessions throughout Springfield, which we are thinking can also be on a weekend and even in outdoor locations, depending on the timing. And as we've learned over the last couple of years, it's also worth making time for virtual office hours. And lastly, in task 5, with adoption, we're looking at the standard public hearing process, which will involve noticing at City Hall and in the newspaper, and can also include Springfield, Oregon Speaks for part of it with Planning Commission. Beyond that, we'll share announcements on the project webpage and through e-updates to help keep people aware of what's going on. And we continue to work with anyone who has questions, testimony, or requests for accommodation. And taking a step back to think about all this work, an approach that we're exploring to make sure our materials are accessible and inclusive for a diverse set of needs is to think about best practices for information display and communication. Translation is one, but even just for some needs for vision. So examples might be to make sure the colors contrast well on our maps. Another might be to make sure our documents like mailers have a really legible font that's large enough. So I hope this overview was helpful, and I'm happy to answer questions from the committee. I'm gonna stop sharing here, but in the meantime, my questions for you are, does the committee want to see changes to the community engagement plan? And are the draft bylaws ready to share as part of the project advisory committee recruitment? Thank you for listening.
Chair Quavala.
Thank you, Chair Landon. Quick question. Is the desire of the beginning of this project eventually to quote unquote get our own metro plan and Springfield specific? Is this the beginning of that process, do you think?
In a sense, yes. We'll have to talk about how we're going to use the metro plan overall with the accompanying text. But the intent is to replace the portion east of I-5 to have that new map be the comprehensive plan map.
But would that also include all the additional metro plan language, et cetera, in our Springfield specific mode?
We'll be working on the text part later. Right now, it's just the visual. So I think you make a great point, because through adoption of the map, we just want to be very clear what replaces what, or what we should use in addition to. And part of the project will explore that. But I will say right now, we're not going to touch the text as much as possible.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I think the public involvement plan looks great, and I commend staff for initiating this project. The 11 by 17, really vague, colorful and pretty, but not very helpful map has been a barrier to making development easy, for both city staff and for folks who come in wanting to develop. So I think it's great that we're kicking this off, and I think everything looks good to me.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Gill.
Thank you, Chair Landon. Thanks for this presentation. I think it's an important project. Absolutely clear maps are the best. I do have some thoughts about the outreach. So I think it might be nice in the sort of combination of digital outreach and direct outreach, perhaps a list of community organizations that would be appropriate to send things directly to, and actually specifically ask them to share it with their constituents. So that might be the Chamber of Commerce or the Realtors Association, or like kind of the same people you're looking to represent on the committee, but also in all of the ongoing updating. I think that those are some options. Arc of Lane County has good connections with people with various abilities, but also Spanish language speakers in the city. So they might be a good organization to work through as well. So just thinking, and I can try to come up with lists of others as well and email them to you, but I think that those direct communications with organizations who can then also spread the word will help a lot if we have a good list of those. Thank you.
Should I respond? I can respond quickly. I think those are great ideas. And question for you is that something you'd like in the community engagement plan draft, or just something we can move to as part of just the broad, we'll do some direct mailings and outreach theme?
Maybe words like we will reach out directly to organizations. I don't think you need to specify a printed mailing. I don't think it needs to be a printed mailing, frankly, for those organizations. And I don't think you need to name the specific ones, except maybe to frame it like organizations related to folks who might use this map, or organizations like, and then list a couple, but you don't have to have the specific ones in there, I think. Does that give you enough?
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Commissioner Cuevila.
Yes, again, I agree that I'm very happy to see that it'll clarify the diagram down to the lots specifically. And I also was really happy to see that you're prepared to involve property owners at the boundaries, or at the fuzzy lines in the boundary early and often in the discussion. I think that's really admirable to offer that. I also agree with your idea to make the committees somewhat larger, maybe either through alternates or if not full membership. I think there's kind of a magic line there for amount of people on a committee. If you have too few, if a couple of people leave, then suddenly you don't have the participation that you wanted. I'm not sure whether to do that as alternates or full members, but I would recommend larger committees. And then for additions, I also agree with Commissioner Gill, but I'd also add in local just outreach and perhaps offering of positions to local NGOs. Looks like we've got the building and development groups covered, but I'd like to include like maybe Renters Association, environmental NGOs, low income and housing advocates, and then the BIPOC community too, if possible. If membership, if they don't want to be members, that's great. But I think we should offer it to them, and we certainly should keep them in the loop as to what we're doing. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to echo Commissioner Quibla's last point about, getting a diverse array of voices on any potential committees and getting folks who are property owners, but also people who would like to be property owners as well would be helpful. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Are we ready for a motion to adopt the community engagement plan and bylaws? I'm sorry, Commissioner Salazar, looks like you still have a comment.
I would just like to make a motion.
Thank you. Proceed.
Yes, I move to approve the community engagement plan and project advisory committee bylaws in the agenda packet for this item as attachments 1 and 2.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Buck. Can we get a roll call on the votes, please?
Before we do that, Chair Landon, I just like to be clear, since the motion was referencing what was in the packet, but then I know that there's been at least one change agreed to in terms of what Commissioner Gill wanted some words added. And then I'd like to hear from Monica Sather how if she thinks that there would be a change to respond to Commissioner Quavela's suggestion.
Okay, response, Monica?
The way we worded the plan, it's an opportunity to keep it flexible, but if you want to see more certainty as far as recruitment, we can change it. It currently, I don't have the page number, but currently says the target for the advisory committee can include, but it's just not specific and intentionally not limiting. So one solution I might have is that we add or just keep the text as is, but know as part of the recruitment process, our materials need to be very clear who we're outreaching to and our actual outreach of doing that. For example, letting people know the recruitment's open more directly to those groups is another tool. So yeah, as I mentioned, the plan isn't limiting to those categories. We do have housing broadly, so then affordable housing is one category in that, or specific expertise. So I don't think it's technically needed, but I'd be open to addressing it because it's not explicit.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I think the clarity would help for me. Commissioner Quavela, what is your interest in that? An explicit text change, or do we leave it?
I really do think that a specific text change would probably be advisable. So I know Commissioner Gill had a few suggestions. Commissioner Salazar also had a few, and mine were, again, local NGOs, renters, environmental groups, low income and housing advocates, and the BIPOC community. If those could be included, I'd be happier.
One thought we had, we really considered environmental groups before giving the general list. But one thought we had with it is trying to put ourselves in that perspective and trying to think, how would this project be of interest to them? So I'm wondering if they have an opportunity to talk to us as part of the recruitment, we could explain it better, but just also not wanting to get hopes up in terms of we're changing environmental policy. So that was one thing we definitely wanted to think through before the draft. So I'm wondering also what do you have something in mind, I guess, with that, like how this could help them or they could help us?
I'm just, land use decisions. I think it's just important to include the broader community. if there's an outreach towards the groups, if they respond, great. If they don't, that's kind of up to them. I in my mind, I can't think for them, but I can kind of think how they wouldn't be really interested in the process. But at the same time, I dislike exclusion. So
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
Yeah, thank you. Monica, I think you guys did a really good job on this. And my thought too, along with what Commissioner Cuevas said, is I don't think that it's so much a question of how other entities might interact with it, whether it be of interest to them. My position is that you let that be up to them. But I think the invitation is really important. I think letting people know that it is a collaborative process, they can have a voice in it, and this is how you engage in that, whatever that interest is. I think that's the important thing. If they choose to say, I don't have an interest, great. But I also think that it's very possible that you might get some things that you didn't expect or didn't see coming. And I think those would be welcome as well. So to me, I think it's not so much who might be interested, but I think the question is, who can we get an invite to give them the option?
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in my mind, I believe that the language in the attachments is sufficiently broad that with the direction that I would feel comfortable keeping this language, and then with the knowledge that staff intends to move forward with the direction that we've just given them in our comment. But I didn't have specific language to add. Commissioners Gill and Cuevas, I'd be open if you wanted to wait until specific amendments were made to these items, then we could wait to see what those changes look like before we make a vote. Or I guess before we would, yeah, move forward with this.
Commissioner Cuevas.
I guess I would offer the changes as a friendly amendment to the motion and say we could move forward on the vote to the motion with those inclusions as recommended by us and not need a rewrite on it right at the moment, but just head nods.
Okay. Sandy.
Sure, perhaps I could frame a motion for if you were open to an amendment, Commissioner Salazar. So motion to approve the community engagement plan as presented, but to add that during the outreach, the broader outreach process, that there would be specific outreach to community organizations, that they would reach out to their members. So that's the first change or addition. And then the second addition is that in recruiting the advisory committee, that an invitation to the groups would be broadened to include local NGOs, including Renters Association, environmental NGOs, the BIPOC community, and low-income housing advocates.
Thank you. That sounds fairly clean. Christina?
I just wanted to provide procedurally, someone will need to move, just say that they, so move what Sandy stated. Someone will need to second. Then you'll all vote to accept, whether to accept the amendment to the motion. And then following that, you'll all vote on the amended motion if the amendment passes. That's the proper procedural order.
Thank you, Christina.
And to not forget about the bylaws. Also, that was the second part.
Commissioner Salazar.
I would like to move that we amend my previous motion with the language previously stated by Sandy Belson in this meeting.
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 You need to do a roll call vote because this
Ah.
is a vote that needs to be documented as to who voted what.
So
Okay.
I can call the roll. Chair Landon,
Aye.
Vice Chair Salazar,
Aye.
Commissioner Quavala,
Yes.
Commissioner Gill,
Aye.
Commissioner McGinley,
Aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, and then we need that second motion, I believe, for the bylaws.
You need to vote now to adopt.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
amended
Yeah,
motion
Christina,
first.
thank you. So now
move
voting
we-
on the motion itself.
I move we adopt the motion as amended.
It's already moved. You just need to vote.
So Chair Landon,
Aye.
Vice Chair Salazar,
Aye.
Commissioner Quavala,
Yes.
Commissioner Gill,
Aye.
Commissioner McGinley,
Aye.
and Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The motion carries. At this time, we will adjourn the CCI.
No, I move we accept the bylaws of the community engagement plan as presented in the package. Sure, that could be worded better.
Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the previous motion was for attachments 1 and 2, which included the community engagement plan as well as the bylaws. Is that correct?
Yeah, I missed exactly what you said in the first motion, but if you referenced attachment 1 and 2 in your original motion, then that did include the bylaws. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
No, that was the original motion.
Okay, then you adopted the bylaws. So I'm just double checking. If anyone objects that they didn't realize they were voting in favor of the bylaws, you should raise that now. Otherwise, I think you can move on.
Sorry for that previous confusion.
Are there any objections?
I think you did a great job, Commissioner Salazar. It was a great motion.
That was great. That was great. At this time, we will adjourn the CCI session and we will reconvene at 7 p.m. for the regular session.
So just so people know, this link is the same link, so you can turn your cameras off or you could log off and come back and it's the same link.
Sandy, just to be clear before you step away, I can just pause this recording, correct? That's what you
Correct.
did last.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Chair Landon,
Present?
Vice Chair Salazar,
Present?
Commissioner Quavala,
Here.
Commissioner Gill,
Present.
Commissioner Bergen,
Here.
Commissioner McGinley,
Present.
and Commissioner Buck.
Isn't
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to ask members of the audience who are joining us by phone or online to please keep yourselves on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. In a few minutes, we will have business from the audience, which is a time for anyone to speak to the Planning Commission on any subject that is not otherwise on our agenda for this evening. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Business from the audience. We will now take business from the audience. As a reminder, this is a time to speak on any topic that is not otherwise on the agenda tonight. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom or press *9 if joining by phone. Please keep yourselves on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. When called upon to speak, please state your name and mailing address. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Sandy, at this time, I'm not seeing anybody in the queue. Okay to proceed, please?
I don't see anybody either, so you can move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you. Call agenda item Catholic Community Services Zone Change. And at this time, we'll ask planning commissioners to declare, disclose potential conflicts of interest and also disclose any new ex parte contacts or independent knowledge of relevant facts. I have no conflicts of interest or knowledge of relevant facts. Commissioner Salazar?
I have no ex parte contact or no independent knowledge of relevant facts and no conflicts of interest. Oh, actually, my one knowledge of independent knowledge of facts is just having driven by the site and being aware of the site from having driven by.
Was that information that bears on your decision tonight at all that's not reflected in the record?
No, it does not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cuevla?
No ex parte contact and no potential conflict of interest. I do serve on the Community Development Advisory Committee, and part of our decisions in the past was recommending funding for expansion of the Catholic Community Services building. We did secure that funding, so that is knowledge that's not in the packet, but I don't think it will influence my decision.
And Commissioner Cuevla, you did disclose that at the public hearing, correct? Was my memory?
I forget, but
Okay.
I'm declaring it now anyway.
Yeah, good. Well, that's a good call, but I think that you also declared it at the public hearing, which helps take care of that. It's just for the commission's benefit. Ex parte contacts and independent knowledge need to be declared only once. Definitely a best practice to do it again if you weren't sure. But conflicts of interest must be declared at every meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Gill is absent. Commissioner Bergen?
I am here.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you are. Forgive me.
That's okay. I have no conflict of interest, no ex parte communication, and no additional knowledge.
Thank you. Commissioner Bergen?
Thank you. I have no ex parte contact, no potential conflict of interest, and no independent knowledge.
Thank you. And I think Commissioner McGinley is out for this evening. Is that correct?
I'm in. I have no potential conflict of interest, no ex parte contact.
It's nice to be wrong sometime. Welcome. Commissioner Buck?
I have no ex parte contact and no independent knowledge.
Thank you. We'll turn the time now over to staff, Andy Limberg, who will do a presentation.
Thank you, Chair Landon. I just wanted to summarize the public hearing and information that's been provided in a revised packet for Commissioner's review. Public hearing meeting testimony was provided and has been summarized in the revised staff report. Staff did include a highlighting of the amended sections for rapid review, and noted that there were 2 people that had provided testimony in opposition. One person provided neutral testimony, and one person actually reversed their testimony from opposition to support as a result of discussions with the applicant outside of the public hearing meeting. At the request of the commission, staff provided additional information about how the decision to rezone the property was arrived at through discussions between staff and the applicant prior to submittal of a rezoning application. So there's a sort of a prelude or some backstory, so to speak, that's been added to the staff report to explain how the decision to proceed with the rezoning was pursued by the applicant, and that's where we are this evening for that matter. The other item of note is that staff has added information about the possible ramifications of rezoning the property into the future, what could happen on the site should it be redeveloped. And interestingly, with new code sections that are coming forward that the commission has reviewed, it actually makes it a little bit easier to redevelop the site without either a public hearing or, depending upon the magnitude of the site redevelopment, potentially public notification. So it all depends on the type of redevelopment on the site should it be rezoned to neighborhood commercial. And staff has outlined, I think briefly in the staff report, it could go anywhere from something requiring only building permits right up through something requiring a public hearing, depending on what is proposed on the site in the future. So that does pose a very real consideration for the commissioners. Upon the rezoning, it becomes then a neighborhood commercial site that accommodates an existing development and could potentially accommodate a different type of development in the future. There's no reason to expect that to be anytime soon based on the applicant's submittal, but it is an important consideration. So staff has highlighted that for your review. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions, but this was the direction that staff had received from the commission at the last meeting, and we did provide that information for your review, and that's why it's being returned to you this evening for your deliberations.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner Cuevila.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to see how because there was some confusion to me as to whether the non-conforming use could be continued with the building expansion under the current zoning. So I'm glad to see that that's been detailed out, and I appreciate that. And the highlighting in Exhibit B really helped those changes to understand that. So thank you very much to Andy.
Thank you, Commissioner Pueblo.
Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. I'm looking for a little bit of clarification from Andy. You had mentioned that the potential, and forgive me if I'm getting this incorrect and understanding incorrectly, the potential uses in the future could be easier through our co-development, and that, from what I'm hearing you say, could have an effect on our decision tonight.
I think it's an important consideration that once the site is rezoned, it could be redeveloped with little to no notification to the neighborhood, and they had expressed concerns about, well, what could potentially happen there. And I guess the easiest and the most anticipated type of redevelopment would be a different tenant moving in, Catholic Community Services vacating the site, getting another building and another site, and another type of organization moving into the site. It could even be a church once it's zoned neighborhood commercial. A church is allowable use, a permitted use, whereas right now it would be discretionary use under the residential zoning. So it does change the nature of potential redevelopment on the site. It would allow for some minor expansions of the building to be done with a minimum development standards type of approval, which is a clear and objective standards. If they meet the criteria, it could proceed without notification to the neighborhood necessarily. It may be very minor changes on the site, similar to what is being proposed currently, which is a minor building expansion. But the code changes are making it easier for residential and commercial development to occur on sites once the zoning is established. It expands the opportunities for development with less restrictive and cumbersome applications.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And if I may just share why I was seeking further clarification, because it was my understanding that regardless of what could go there, what the potential projects was in, and maybe I'm pulling incorrectly from past applications that we've talked about, but what the plans are irrelevant to if we think that this was the appropriate zone change or not. But so hearing you say that the notification to public is what could change, that is very helpful. So thank you for that.
Christina Cross?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that I think under the criteria of approval, the potential change in the way the public notification process works is information the Planning Commission should know, but it is not relevant to your decision on this particular quasi-judicial zone change. I think Andy and Commissioner Bergen are correct that it is the potential scope of uses that could be developed on the site as permitted uses, whether under ministerial standards of type 1 review, which don't have public notification, but the public can see all of the clear and objective standards that would be applied that would have to be met, or a somewhat discretionary approval with notification to surrounding neighbors. So I think it's that list of potential uses and then, you know, the category of uses in the zone that is what's most relevant.
Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this isn't a question. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. I think just looking at the criteria of approval in and of themselves, I think, yeah, again, want to give, lauds to Andy and all the staff. I know Michael did a lot of work on this and just making it clear to us the ways in which the criteria of approval are met. And also I know that the applicant was also helpful in giving some additional information in the last meeting. So it's, I believe, based on the information that we've gotten from staff, especially in this last report, that the criteria of approval have been met. So that's just my 2 cents before we go to a motion.
Good, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, are we ready for a motion to approve the zoning map amendment?
Oh, I have another comment, Chair, please.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I think I speak for the entire commission and that we really value and support the work that Catholic Community Services is doing in the city. We want to accommodate them as much as we can. And because of this important and charitable work they do there. I really have a problem though with the potential of a commercial zoning being allowed for something like a convenience store or a fast food in the area because of its proximity to the elementary school, where I think you're going to have a lot of children, et cetera, traffic in that area. I think that that school, I think there's a lot of children that actually walk to school there. So I have a little bit of difficulty with this. I believe that if the applicant is in the audience and could reassure us at all that that's not in their plans, I know it would really help me make a decision. I'm not sure if that would be anything that the other commissioners would like to hear or not.
I think I would. Do we have a representative from the applicant?
Well, we had closed the public hearing. You can't ask for comments from the applicant without reopening the public hearing, and then you would need to notice it and provide other opportunity for response from the public to any new testimony.
Christina,
Okay, sorry.
Clarification.
Christina, just for purposes of clarification, my recollection from the applicant's testimony provided at the public hearing was that they had budgeted for a substantial amount of money to do this building expansion and to locate one of the programs on the site. And by virtue of that investment, My understanding is that the applicant intends to remain on the site. And that's the reason for requesting this rezoning, which it itself is also a substantial investment in time and money and professional expertise to bring it to this point. So, so hopefully, Commissioner Quabola, some of the, I guess, testimony provided by the applicant should provide some comfort that they've invested in the site a substantial amount of money and time and programmatic activities to remain resident on the site.
Yeah, and I understand that it's not a promise, but their write-up seemed to suggest that they were going to continue. They've been there for a while and they're going to continue there for a while, though obviously they're not held to that. Other comments or questions? Okay, we ready for a motion to approve the zone map amendment? Commissioner Salazar?
Chair, I would like to make a motion. I move to adopt the order approving the zoning map amendment that is in the packet as attachment 6 for this item.
Okay.
Second.
I'm sorry. Thank you for being smarter than I was there. I mean that. Go ahead. I think we heard a second. Thank you. I'll roll call the votes. Landon, aye. Salazar,
Aye.
Koivula,
Yes.
Gil, is Gil here?
Aye. Yes.
You? Bergen,
Aye.
McGinley,
Aye.
and Buck.
Aye.
Motion passes. At this time, we will turn the time over to Mark Rust for a presentation on the development code update.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you, Chair Landon. Can you hear me okay?
Very well, thank you.
Great, thanks. So tonight I'm back before you to discuss the Development Code Update project. As you'll recall at your last meeting, you approved an order recommending approval of the Development Code to the City Council. And tonight we're here to discuss a supplemental recommendation that we've talked about. I have a few PowerPoint slides to share tonight, so I'll put those up now. If you can click the right buttons here. Hopefully you can see that main screen now there. So again, tonight to discuss the Springfield Development Code Update project. Just quickly, I like to go through the purpose. This was approved as part of the community engagement plan and also the objectives of the project and the timeline of the project. We are proceeding at this point in anticipation of adopting the code on time based on the state mandated timeline. So the supplemental recommendation, there's the attachment to the packet tonight that was sent out prior to receiving a couple of comments or suggestions from 2 of the planning commissioners. So I've incorporated some of the suggested revisions into the slides tonight for consideration. So there's essentially, I think, 6 topics, and we can just walk down them briefly. I'm not sure, I'll defer to you all how you want to do this. Maybe I can just flip through them quick and then we can come back to them. Basically, the topics are retention of existing structures. The number 1 under here is what is included in the draft order tonight. And then the second one in blue under retention of existing structures is, I think, my attempt at incorporating the language and suggestions that was provided. And then the second topic is incentivizing density, which I didn't receive any additional comments on at this point. Third topic of home ownership. Again, the first one being what's in the packet, the second one being a revised option based on some comments. The other topic of efficient use of lot area, I did not receive any additional comments on. And then density bonus, did not receive any additional comments on. And then a new topic that's not included in the packet tonight. I titled it retention of trees, just for lack of a better descriptor, but this blue language here was provided by Commissioner Cravula. So those are the items. We can walk through them one by one, or however you see fit. We can wordsmith some of this live as we go to kind of amend the order to get hopefully maybe the order to a point tonight that you all feel comfortable in recommending approval of the supplemental order or whatever other path you would like to see. So with that, I'll defer back to the chair and am available for questions.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a question concerning one of the slides on bullet points on page 6, slide 6?
Sure, let me get to that here.
Thought I saw something in the packet tonight about paying people, like subsidizing, city subsidizing in order to
Oops, I passed it.
make it possible for people to get housing. Can you speak to that? I may be looking at the wrong incentive.
Is it this under the home ownership here?
Yes, option 2, go down to the 4th line, down payment assistance.
Incentive programs.
Fourth line in particular.
Down payment assistance loan or grant programs.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious where funding for that comes from. I'm not sure if all the citizens of the city or even the majority would be necessarily interested in getting.
Mm-hmm. And I see Sandy pop up. I know she works in that realm a lot more. I'm happy to defer to Sandy. I'm sure she can explain that.
Okay.
Sure. We are entitlement community, which means that we receive money from the Federal Housing and Urban Development, Community Development Block Grant Fund. And so every year we allocate some of that funding toward what we call SHOP, which is down payment assistance grants. Actually, they're loans, sorry, to qualified home buyers. So that program has been in place, I mean, decades, I think. I'm not really sure when it started. It is challenging in this real estate environment to actually provide any SHOP down payment loans because of the limitations on the expense of the house and the conditions of the homes. And so we have not been able to get those out the door because the prices are just so high in our community. But we haven't given up on it, but that is a program that we do have in place utilizing the federal funds.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies and helps me a lot. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
And I may just turn off my slide share, and Christina Kraz has indicated that she can try to capture live changes as you discuss. So if you're okay with that, I'll stop sharing now and look to Christina to potentially share her screen, and then we can make edits to any of this language in the reflecting the order, if that makes sense.
That works fine. We'll start with Commissioner Gill.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to staff for putting this together and giving us the extra time for this. As I said at the last meeting, I think that this is an important opportunity for us. I am fine with all of the language that is currently in here. I also appreciate the addition of the tree conversation.
Okay, Commissioner Cravula.
I would suggest under the one that we've got right in front of us about, no, actually it's the one about ownership, to not only promote home ownership, but equity building, include that. So when we're looking at promoting home ownership, because we found through the Community Development Advisory Commission that does committee that does recommend funding, that we recently funded that B Street co-op. And that was an equity funding. That's not really necessarily ownership at this point in time. So I think that might be a good way to go forward. So instead of where we have number 2, support home ownership, I would also suggest and equity building as language in right after home ownership.
Commissioner Cuevila, do you mind if I ask, tell me what equity building means functionally? I'm not familiar with, I mean, I know it means gathering money, but I'm not sure what it means in this context. I'm just interested.
Yeah, on the C Street, for instance, on the C Street Oasis, what there was is there was a loan given and a grant given, I believe, to the developer. And how that was going to work is that the developer would hold the land in the land on the property, and that there was a co-op that was put together that each person would be able to begin to purchase ownership in the buildings, kind of like the way a condominium is done, except they would be gradually purchasing. So they call that equity building because it's not direct ownership. You don't own the title yet, but you begin to own like a percentage of in this case, it was a percentage of the buildings on the property, but not the land. So it's a kind of a new creative way.
Okay, can't say I've heard of that before. So
to head toward home ownership.
Yeah. Commissioner Salazar, and thank you, by the way.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 points and 1 question. One is that, in terms of the first item around retention of existing structures, I really like that language. I especially want to highlight the written comment that Commissioner Cuevila gave for the last meeting, mentioning that older housing stock is often one of the cheapest ways into especially homeownership, and one of the most affordable ways. And so I like this. I think that's a really great point that Commissioner Cuevila makes. We need to retain our older, smaller houses because those are often some of the entryways that people have into homeownership, especially. And oftentimes the older housing stock is what is most naturally affordable. Second point regarding homeownership. I apologize for missing the last meeting. I think I was able to catch up on watching that meeting, and I think there was some great discussion that happened there. And I would just like to highlight that I think, Sandy mentioned this. I remember hearing this from a previous city council meeting that I watched where there was a report back on CDBG funds, and just really highlight that there is a homeownership program to help low income or income qualified people who are 80% or below area median income qualify for home ownership. In the last 2 years, I believe from that previous meeting that I watched, there's been 1 applicant and 0 awards for homeownership, that homeownership program, because the housing is just too expensive. We're asking folks who are making 80% of area median income to put in 7% down on a $300,000 house, which is about the cost of a starter home right now. So I think it's great that we're asking the council to explore more home ownership programs to help. But at the end of the day, we need more housing stock. We need more houses, smaller houses for our community to buy, to create that opportunity for home ownership. And I think that one thing we've taught that we've maybe gotten lost in the minutia of this conversation around the code change and around the middle housing amendments is that this is about creating more housing and creating more housing opportunities. I think that, just looking at the regional housing needs assessment that was produced by Oregon Housing and Community Services in 2021 noted that right now, Oregon, the state of Oregon is 140,000 units behind. We have 140,000 houses less than we have families that need houses in the state currently. In the next 20 years, we'll need 584,000 new homes to be built, which to meet that need in the next 20 years, we basically have to double the production of housing in the next 20 years. So I think one thing that's just really important is that to note is that we need more housing. And I think this middle housing, creating more opportunities for middle housing is a really important way to increase the housing stock, because this is a wonderful place to live. People are going to continue to move here, and we have to plan for that. And we have to provide more opportunities for housing to get built. I've been a little disappointed in our conversations that I think in a lot of the opportunities that we've had to take a maximize approach to building housing, building smaller housing on smaller lots, we've taken that minimize approach. And that's for different reasons. And I think we're balancing the need for housing with the livability standards. I mean, we've chosen to maximize the requirements for parking. We've chosen to maximize the lot sizes. And I think we just need to recognize that also in a housing crisis, we are looking at a burning building and we have a fire hose right next to us. And what we're choosing to do with that fire hose is to fill gallon buckets to throw onto the fire, and then asking ourselves, why is this fire not out? Or why is this not working to get this fire out? So I love these supplemental recommendations. We've talked about using these as a way to incentivize density in a smart way. And but I think in terms of home ownership, especially, I think it's important to recognize that we just need more houses for people to buy. And some of that new housing being built is going to allow the older housing to be more affordable for folks to have that opportunity into the home ownership market. My final question, thanks for bearing with me for that point. My final question is about increased density for affordable housing. And I just want to make sure that our language is clear there, because Senate Bill 8 already, that was passed last year in 2021, already gives a provision for density bonuses for income qualified housing, for affordable housing, on top of existing density standards. So I think that's generally, I'm not going to quote exactly word for word, but generally it's a 2%. That law, which was passed, gives a 200% bonus for low density, a 150% bonus for medium density, and a 125% bonus for high density. And I just want to be clear. I guess my question is what we're proposing additional density bonuses on top of that, what's provided in Senate Bill 8? And if that's the case, does that make those developments substantially larger than the other properties surrounding them? I think I just want to make sure that that language is clear in light of that law, and that we're clear about what we're asking for. So yeah, thank you.
If I could just chime in, Chair.
Please.
I don't know, specifically Commissioner Salazar, if that was a question for me, but just some quick thoughts. And the first thought is the title on this section of density bonus may not be the most accurate title because we're talking about things other than just density bonus. But I think it goes to your question too, is like, would these incentives for income qualified housing make these larger than other similar housing? And so if and when we start talking about height limit increases or lot coverage increases, then that would, potentially make these types of developments stand out more so than a non-income qualified project that had to meet more restrictive height and lot coverage. The one thing I'll say about Senate Bill 8 is that you're right. I think that is in play and that will be applicable. So at least in my mind, I think, and this is really for the commission to discuss, but I think any density bonus would likely be on top of what Senate Bill 8 contemplated. And I'll just share that in talking with Dylan Lamar, who testified at the public hearing on the development code and who is one of the development team members for the C Street Co-op, even at the 200% density bonus increase, they won't be able to do, well, first of all, they wouldn't be able to do what they did on C Street, and they won't be able to do what they're trying to do. I think it's on F Street, the next one they're already planning. So they are, I know, specifically looking for an even higher density bonus than what is allowed by Senate Bill 8 for kind of their next project and what would allow C Street to happen again. So.
Thanks, Mark. That's a really helpful context.
Thank you. Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Salazar. I echo a lot of what you said, and I think it's important that you said it, so thank you. I was going to suggest changing density bonus to something like lot size reduction, unless we are looking at a true density bonus, like the residential infill project in Portland looked at with deeper affordability and allowing sixplexes. But if we're just, I guess we can just add it there. That works. Great, Christina. The other thing that I wanted to suggest was that we recommend that council revisits this at a certain point. I shared similar sentiments to Commissioner Salazar in advocating for the maximize approach. I think that it's important that we look back and see, are we getting the type of development that we hoped for? Are there standards that we should change? So I don't have a specific time period in mind. There's going to be quite a few changes coming with the climate friendly and equitable cities rulemaking process. So I think after that, perhaps revisiting specifically middle housing and residential standards could be important because we don't have much time. This is big change and it's incremental. So it may feel like the whole world is changing July 1st, but then nothing will happen and it'll happen really slowly. And maybe in 20 years we'll notice, but I'd like to notice a little bit before that and see if we can adjust things before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bergen.
I'm just going to throw my thoughts out and hopefully you guys can pick up the pieces and collect. I do appreciate the points that have been brought up by Commissioner Salazar and Commissioner McGinley. It is really difficult to balance the need for more doors and maintaining the community that people want to live in. I don't know if this is already written into the density bonus section that we're talking about. And I know highlights probably the 300,000 level of what this looked like, but a couple of years back. And then of course, balancing redevelopment for a new use and keeping the existing structure as we've talked about. But an opportunity potentially is, I recall And I don't know if it was state or if it was citywide. So like I said, I hope this doesn't turn into rambling, but I'm hoping someone can pick up the pieces here for me. But I recall a lot of it happened around campus in Eugene, where an owner could take over, not could take over, but there was, say, just as example, a single dwelling on the property, and then they built an apartment complex that allowed more open doors. And then they can hold the property taxes at that rate for the next 10 years. Is that something that we could potentially incorporate into this density bonus section, or would that be considered part of the density bonus? I think it's something that we could look at potentially in the future to say, well, and then that couples back to wanting to keep the existing structures, but then also wanting to provide a lot more open doors. A lot of the apartment complexes that are newer were able to utilize that, keeping the same property tax rate. And I again don't know, well, I shouldn't say again, I don't know if that has something to do with that we would have to coordinate with the county as well, or what that would look like. But an opportunity to encourage more units being built. That being said, I understand and appreciate the need and desire to keep existing structure. So there are all of the pieces. I don't have any answer or substantive piece, but I just wanted to, as we were talking about this, that wasn't that long ago that happened in Eugene. And I think that that's something that we could potentially explore to allow more opportunities.
Thank you. Commissioner Cuevila?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with both what Commissioner Bergen and Commissioner McGinley and Salazar are all saying about trying to increase density bonus, et cetera, for affordability. I believe what Commissioner Bergen was speaking of was the MUPT program, which is multiple unit tax. I don't know exactly how the acronym works, but it has been used to develop some large apartments in Eugene. But I really support the idea of increasing things like the C Street Co-op. So great, if we can get density bonuses to do that, that's a wonderful program. I have a couple of other changes that I would like the committee to consider. The first is under the demolition of housing. So this is under retention, Mark, that slide. So it's the slide, I think, before.
Christine
Okay.
is actually driving the PowerPoint here, but yeah,
okay.
Retention of existing structures.
Yes,
She's got it there.
I kind of thought that if we could, I don't see the purpose of single units dwellings. I like the idea of existing structures, because so I think that single unit dwellings should be, or existing dwellings, I think is a good one, because if we can, if there's an existing triplex or something like that, I think, and it's a, sort of affordable or something like that, I think that that's a good thing to retain that. But I would, consider if the commission doesn't agree with me. The other one is on the last item that I suggested, which was incentivize retention of trees. So it's item 7 or something. Okay. Yes, I thought about that some more. And I also think that an incentive to planting new trees and shrubs, et cetera, would be a valuable thing too. So if, for instance, a developer was to decide to, build a large development, and we could allow him to have greater height, lesser parking, lesser setbacks, because an entire area he's going to plant trees and shrubs and turn it into a lovely park for the people who live there. And it will also, benefit the environment, and et cetera. So if I could get a buy-off on that from the commission, I'd be grateful, and my changes would be complete.
If I could just, go ahead, Christina.
I just wanted to check that this language that I've added captures what you're suggesting, Commissioner Cuevila. I added the second decreased that's underlined to help clarify the grammar of the sentence when I changed it. But
I think, Christina, just the word existing trees after saying additional planting of, maybe
Get rid
doesn't
of
make
existing.
sense.
Yeah, get rid of existing.
Or put it before. Yeah, I think something
Right.
that works. And just to clarify really quickly, under a couple of the other examples where there's two options, my original intent was that you choose one of the options, either one or two. I probably wasn't clear on that at the outset. So if there's an opportunity to, if you want to click on one of those other ones, Christina, if you could. So under home ownership, for example, I don't know if both of these are necessary. My original intent was to replace one with two. So I don't know if that's how the Planning Commission was thinking of it. Similarly with the very first one on the previous slide. So anyway, but you guys, you're obviously welcome to adopt these however you see fit. So
Commissioner Puebla. Commissioner Puebla, are you up?
No, sorry, my hand was still up. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Bergen.
I wanted to throw an idea out, and I don't want to counter what you're suggesting, Mark. But the one that we're looking at right now, homeownership, I see the importance of the workforce housing. And I don't, maybe I'm not reading correctly on the second option, but I wonder if we could talk about housing types under the first one, as far as like workforce housing and keeping that there, and then opportunity, homeownership opportunities as far as like the programs and whatnot as a second one, to make it clear that it's two really important pieces and not one put together complete thought. But I don't, that's the way that I was reading it, and with some word removal. But if you would prefer to make it just one piece, I can understand that as well. But the way that I was reading that is, it number one really talks about the workforce housing, and then the second one talks about the programs and equity building. Yeah, I guess the programs in general. So maybe I'm the only one that was reading that and thinking that process through. I'm happy to read through them and select one.
Here's an idea I've taken. So if you'll see underlined under number 2, I've taken I think what you're describing is there's strategies that promote home ownership and equity building. And then there's the types of housing that you promote with those programs. So I've added a sentence using language from number 1 into number 2, if the commission wants to consider that. It states promote homeownership, promote these, let's say opportunities, so we don't have to repeat equity building programs. Promote these opportunities for a variety of housing types, including middle housing and other workforce housing. Does that meet the intent of what you were describing?
I think so. Yeah, thank you. I think what I was reading is I saw the important word that we talked about last session of workforce housing, and then I wasn't seeing that in the second one. So I do appreciate you implementing that.
Question, if I may, do we have, workforce housing, is that something that's defined, or except that it's not expensive, less expensive?
I would have to double check to confirm that it is a defined term and what program or what state law it's defined under, but my understanding is workforce housing is a defined term. I just don't have it.
My understanding, Chair, if I may add, Mark, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, workforce housing is defined as housing that's affordable at 80% of area median income and below, or affordable to households that make 80% of the area median income and below. So if we wanted to be a little more direct with that language, we could use 80% of AMI rather than workforce.
I think there are some definitions that consider workforce housing to be housing that's affordable to those making at or even slightly above AMI as included in that as well. I think there are some programs that may go up to as much as 150% of AMI, which is still not, a large, those are not wealthy residents that are making at 150% of AMI.
Okay, it's a little bit more
But you
broad.
could-
Commissioner Gill?
Thank you. I think for me, we have a variety of housing types and then include a couple of examples. So for me, that gives some good direction that we want some affordability, but we want them to look at all kinds of options for this, and that we want a variety of types of houses to be included for that home ownership opportunity. So for me, this language covers sort of that breadth that we're going for. So I wouldn't need a specific, I would actually not want one specific definition, because I agree that we need all the kinds of housing, and we really want them to look at these kinds and maybe more that we don't even have on our list yet.
Okay, right now I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Okay, are we ready for a motion to adopt the supplemental recommendation?
Chair,
I
I was
can get-
wondering if, I know we have to go, that there's another option on the previous slide. Yeah, thank you, Christina. So I believe we still have to, I guess, technically make a decision between the two options on this slide and the slide we're looking at previously. I wonder if we could discuss this slide a little bit, and then maybe spend, like, if Christina, if you wouldn't mind just spending like 2 minutes on each slide for us to read through like the language that's been added to see if that's what we like, and if we need to make a choice between two options, if we could do that as well.
What I would appreciate from the commission, if it's helpful for helping you with a motion, I would appreciate, I can definitely go through those slides, and then I would appreciate getting the commission's input as to which options on each slide to include in a motion, and then I will copy paste those into another Word document and switch my screen share so that there's a Word document with a motion app. When someone is ready to make that motion, they can be captured there.
Okay, Christine, it sounds like I'm not seeing any thumbs down. I saw a couple of some thumbs up. So Christina, floor is yours.
It sounds like at this point, Chair, that commissioners can just read this slide while it's up here for a minute. Although I do see some hands popping up, so.
Yes. Let's Commissioner Salazar.
I'm sorry, Chair, my hand was up from the previous comment.
Okay. So we're reviewing right now. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. I think especially with the edit that Commissioner Cuevila made, I would prefer the first option to the second. That's where I'm at with this particular recommendation.
It is a bit more specific. Commissioner Bergen.
Just a moment, please. I was all in favor for the second option, but I wanted, after Commissioner Salazar's input, I wanted to review more, a little closer.
If I could just chime in really quick, I think the explore and adopt language at the beginning was somewhat consistent with maybe the language in one of the other new sections below as well. So whether the commission likes the explore and adopt options versus the consider additional strategy language, maybe some of the difference, but also the more specific about incentive programs, grants, loans.
I'm not 100% sure.
I
that-
I can't raise my hand when I'm doing speaker screen share, but I'm raising my hand audio wise.
Please proceed.
I think, you know, one thing I want the commission to think about is, I think for explore and adopt, explore options that support homeownership and equity building programs. I think the explore and adopt options language here is a little bit different. And I wonder if the idea that you would adopt, I would encourage you to keep the language about additional strategies, because I do think it is important that the council recognizes that you have taken action through changes to the recommendation you made at your last meeting to strengthen some of the language around retaining existing single dwellings and detached developments. So I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost. That there are strategies you have already recommended through your primary recommendation. So you would be asking the council, I think, to encourage additional types of programs for rehabilitation or retention.
The paragraph 1 would go away if 2 remains. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Or not necessarily. I mean, in theory, depending on how you want to wordsmith it, you could keep both of these and include them both if they weren't necessarily repetitive of each other, if they were distinctly different.
Okay. Commissioner Bergen.
You and I love the opportunity to potentially combine the two. I still do lean towards option 2, because in my opinion, and my understanding, I should say, the intent of this is about the existing structure. At the end of the first option, it talks about when redeveloping a site with middle housing. And I feel as though it shouldn't be with middle housing. It should be with any housing at all, if the intention truly is about the structure and not what is to be placed on the property. And so for that, I do lean towards option 2, because I don't see that last language of the first one to be what we're after here.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I also kind of lean towards option 2 as well. And the reason it kind of coincides with what Commissioner Bergen said about not limiting it to middle housing. I think the thing that I'd like to see us it would be great if we could throw some language in option 2 that really emphasize keeping the options open. I think that incentive programs, grants, and loans are fine, and we do that a little bit in other creative options when redeveloping the site with new housing. To me, I don't want it to be limited. I mean, I think when I look at this issue overall, it just has been my feel through the time that I've been part of this process. I know that many of you have worked on this a lot longer than I have, so I haven't been on the commission that long. But one of the things that stands out to me is there are real challenges with what the state has kind of given us to work with. I don't think that there's any disagreement on that, and I think that we need to keep our options as open as possible. And so that was kind of my comment. You know, and I think the rewrite, the edits that Christina did well, since I raised my hand, really speak to that. I think we need to be as open and creative as possible, because it's hard to know where this goes from here over the course of time. But I think whatever we can do to support creative solutions is advisable. And in the spirit of the supplemental recommendation is to really get that point across, is to be as broad and creative as possible when considering that.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I changed my mind. I do like option 2 a lot, and I think especially with the I think that strong language edits that Commissioner Bergen added. The one edit that I would recommend or ask to see would be replacing options with strategies in item 2.
Or a slash, maybe strategies / options.
I just believe strategy is a little more active.
Okay.
Options is a little more passive, but I'd be open.
All right, I'm game. Commissioner Gill.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I was muted and having issues with unmuting. All the things got said for this one for me, so I'm in support of number 2, as it is currently on the screen. And I think strategies alone works to cover those things.
Commissioner Koivula.
Number 2 for me as well, even though I did make the change on number 1, I misunderstood that these were to be substitutes rather than complements. One concern I have with that is when redeveloping a site with new housing, because I think there's a good reason to retain, rehabilitate existing structures through incentive programs when we're not redeveloping a site with new housing. And that is also currently done through community development block grants now, where people are, they're helped with a new roof, or they're helped with a wheelchair ramp or that type of thing, new furnace. So that is an existing program that the city does, but I'm not sure whether constraining this to only redeveloping a site with new housing, it really captures as much protection of and rehabilitation of good existing structures to me. I'm not sure that captures it when we constrain it with redevelopment.
You have just above rehabilitation of existing structures. You don't think that kind of covers it? And I'm really asking a genuine question.
Commissioner Quavela?
Yes.
One of my questions is this intended to be focused at residential properties? So existing, this bullet point had said existing structures, where the previous one had said dwellings. And so I think unless the other commissioners object, you might consider removing the when redeveloping a site with new housing that I had added in response to Commissioner Bergen, and state dwellings instead of structures. Otherwise, I think it's unclear to the council whether you broadly mean all structures like commercial and industrial, or those that are residential. Either one would be fine for the commission to recommend, but I wanted to help clarify.
I did have a problem with the dwellings versus structures myself. So my choice would be to change structures to dwelling and then remove when redeveloping a site with new housing, but that's my opinion.
Commissioner Salazar.
Sorry, just as you remove that, Christina, I think my recommendation would be to say and to just add existing. Thank you. Or not existing, but just especially before that clause, other creative options, especially when redeveloping a site with new housing. I think in my mind that addition encourages creative uses of the existing structures that are there. If you can turn a 2-story house into two units instead of 1 unit, fantastic. So just I think opening to a broad range, but also like really like giving the incentive to redevelopment.
Good. Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. I do agree with the dwellings change, because when I read structures, I was thinking backyard sheds, things that aren't necessarily code, because it is technically a structure. And some of those can be seen to be tossed or torn down. I am understanding Commissioner Quavela's when redeveloping a site with new housing. In my mind, this reads especially when redeveloping a new site, period. With new housing, I think that that can be interpreted of, well, it's not a brand new house, it's just an addition, and I'm going to, I don't know what the interpretations can be out there, but to me, it seems like the point is clear when we do just a new site or redeveloping a site, period, regardless of what they're redeveloping it with. For example, if they were to be able to implement commercial of some sort that was allowable, just trying to think of what could change in the future. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, any other comments, additions, changes? Okay, hearing none, are we ready for a motion to adopt the supplemental recommendation as we see it?
I do not yet have input from the commission on all 3 slides. So if the commission could go through this incentivized density bullet point and take a moment to read that if you didn't. And let me know if there are changes that the group wants to make that I can copy into a draft motion for you.
So Christina, you'll change the slide for them.
I didn't get input on this. Consider ways to incentivize high density housing developments. So I wanted to just real quick check. I can even increase my screen so maybe I can see more. If there were the chair, you could ask for even thumbs up for those that are on camera, if they're good with that or some other method.
I had a hand for Commissioner Bergen. Did you withdraw?
Well, I'm not sure, because I'm thinking about what's currently there, if I may. The housing developments that are currently located near public open spaces, and in my mind was not sure if we wanted this to reconsider ways to incentive high density as a specific number we're looking for as far as density goes, or if we're looking consider ways to incentivize higher density, stating we're just wanting to elevate it larger to more units than where it currently is, or if there's a minimum where we're wanting to reach, if we're wanting to be more proactive, or if we want to set a baseline.
How would you propose the wording on that?
Depending on what we're looking for. In my mind, I think higher density allows for an opportunity to achieve that a little easier, instead of setting the bar. We're allowing the opportunity to achieve something more than what's already established, instead of setting a minimum.
I'm seeing some head nodding on that one, by the way. Commissioner Salazar?
I just wanted to bring this up as a question for the rest of the commission. I know we've talked about incentivizing in some conversations previously, we've talked about incentivizing density, not only close to green space, public open space defined here, but also to transit, and wanted to see if we wanted to add maybe, to add that ability to incentivize density, not only closer to public open space, but or to transit stops, or some language to that effect.
And there may be one of the other topics this may be almost duplicative of another one of the topic or bullets below. So there may be an opportunity to combine.
Right, the one from slide 7, I believe, the top one on slide 7, like related to density bonus. So those two might be able to combine in some way.
I read the incentivized density is incentivizing density not specific to affordable housing. The language in number 7 is specific to income qualified and subsidized affordable housing. You can certainly combine those, but you'll need to provide me direction because they're two different concepts you would be combining.
Commissioner Gill.
Perhaps they could be, density could be the category, and then there's 1 and 2 under density. And if they're next to each other, we might be able to look how to define them. Would that be an okay way to start? We can see them next to each other. Thank you, Christina. So am I looking at this? Maybe it's, we talk about, list the way, kind of what we did on the other one, where we kind of listed the ways at the beginning, but then the types second, like we did, I think on, I can't remember which one now, I'm really sorry. But that way we can add in the public green space to the reduced parking density bonus, height limit increase. And then in one or the other, we have the income qualified or subsidized housing as like specifically called out. I'm open to any of this. I just thought I would start the words.
Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, Commission, I have a lot of thoughts around these items. To me, I kind of agree with Christina's line of thinking of considering these as two separate items. Maybe considering the item that's now listed second under density bonus as what we were considering before, incentivizing density, and then thinking about the areas that we want denser developments closer to, and what is practicable and helpful for people to live close to. It's helpful to live close to public open space, and it's helpful to live close to transit, as well as a number of other opportunities like jobs and healthcare services. And I see the kind of category that this was added to as less density bonus and more incentivizing affordable housing as its own kind of piece with different incentives, including density, but also the other incentives listed there. So I see them as two separate items.
You're talking about the public open spaces as opposed to reduced parking, height limit increases, lot coverage increase. They're just separate goals. Proposed verbiage.
I guess I would propose breaking them back out and pulling that language that was added to the density bonus category, pulling that out and having it be a separate item again, and adding transit language to that item, and then looking at that item that's called density bonus separately.
And if I could just interject, just for clarity, the order itself doesn't list categories. That I just had included kind of titles to each of these things for purposes of discussion. So you're welcome to title them or have categories, but the way the order was originally written didn't have kind of titles or categories. So for whatever they're worth, they're standalone bullets or separate items.
Commissioner Bergen.
You, Chair. I actually wonder, and Commissioner Gill, I appreciate that you brought this to our attention. I actually wonder if the first one under the label of density bonus may be more relevant underneath the housing that we've previously talked about, as Commissioner Salazar read my mind when he was talking about that, because the housing really talks about incentives for income qualified or subsidized housing. And I think that these are strategies for that category that we were talking about. I'm not saying that that's the correct, but in my mind, that's what it feels like to me, that those are strategies that we are talking about as far as additional strategies to have. So maybe if it was to find a parent, for lack of a better word, a parent category, then maybe that's the one that's appropriate. I'm also okay with it standing alone still, but I like what Commissioner Gill was talking about of finding the similarities. And when I'm reading that to say the and income qualified housing incentives, then that seems to be like the home for me.
Sorry, I might just be too tired. So I apologize. So the headers are not going to be in the order. So if you're talking about combining this first one under density bonus with, I don't know which one you're talking about, because there is neither of the other categories we've talked about reference income qualified subsidized housing. So I'm just trying to figure out what you would be combining it.
It was right on the slide. Thank you. Sorry. The slide that you're on now, homeownership, it does on the second point here, it talks about workforce housing. And I understand that workforce housing and income and subsidized housing is not the same, but we're talking about discounts, like there's SDC waivers, discounts, down payment assistance, reading through these incentivized programs. I don't know if that just, in looking at that, that's where it seems like it would maybe find a home, because we're talking about programs that are for a specific qualification and that revolve around homeownership. I don't know if my mind is stretching too much, but to me, if I'm hearing Commissioner Gill's recommendation earlier, trying to find a place for it, I can see that it might have a second category that it needs to go with, or a second point that it would go with. And this seems to me to be the most logical home for it. For not to be, because it says home, whatever. I'll stop being corny now, but I hope you're understanding what I'm saying.
Commissioner Gill.
So after that, it was helpful to be reminded that these headings aren't actually in the order. And so as standalone items, I just was trying to look at those together to see if they merge together. I think Commissioner Salazar made the case that they don't. And if adding transit to that language is sufficient for what Commissioner Salazar was interested in, then I'm good with that and having them be separate items. So with that being the case, we are not comparing one and one currently under density bonus. They would be standalone items, not up against each other. Sorry, I made you do that, Christina.
Oh, no problem. I understood your intent was to look at them side by side. I just wanted to clarify for the commission, you don't have to worry about how these are grouped or labeled, because that won't be in the order unless you want it to be in the order, but I wasn't proposed before.
Other comments, suggestions? We're having some good input here.
Do you want to move on to the retention of trees? So I wasn't hearing objections, so I've drafted your motion with both of these density bonus options in there. That handles this slide because we moved that incentivized density onto this slide. So if you want to talk about retention of trees next, we can go back to slide 6 after, if that works for the commission.
Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my only ask for on this slide, I think the retention of trees language is great. I would just add SDC waivers onto that density bonus piece as well.
Any other comment?
I'll just, if I could interject, that I think in the previous one, we had systems development charges waivers or discounts. So I don't know if you want to be consistent or just say waivers here, but anyway, just thought I'd point that out.
Go. I don't want to split hairs, but a waiver is any portion of the systems development charge. It can be a complete or a partial waiver. So I'm not sure that it matters unless the commission has a preference.
I don't feel strongly on that. Commissioner Salazar?
I think just as long as the language is consistent between the two.
Okay, other questions, comments? Okay. At this time, are we ready for a motion to adopt supplemental recommendation?
Mary did have a question.
Okay, please, Commissioner Bergen.
On the retention of trees, I respect Commissioner Quavila's intent here, and maybe I'm in the wrong in thinking this, but as I'm reading through, we're talking about, I'm looking at the third line down, other sensitive natural areas as a part of middle or multi-unit development. Would we want to preserve these as well if it was just a single unit development, or are we just looking for the multi-unit development on preservation of trees? Like, for example, if they were wanting to build a bigger home and it would eliminate a really large old tree, I'm just curious about that piece about the unit size.
I can support a part of housing development instead of middle or multi-unit. That'd cover all of it then, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Other input, good discussion.
Was there one last slide, slide 6? Was there anything last on this? I don't think we talked about efficient use of lot area or if it's necessary, but.
I'm not exactly sure what that means, Mark. Maybe I'm not seeing something, but I'm having a little trouble wrapping my head around that efficient use of lot area description.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I have a great explanation for it. I think we tried to capture some of the sentiment out of the deliberations throughout the process. And so if this doesn't seem to capture something that the commission feels is important, we can disregard it or so.
My gut feeling is that you've kind of covered it in some of the other bullet points, but others may have different feelings. Commissioner Bergen.
I'm reading through this and trying to understand, but I think the intent here, if I'm trying to pull out pieces, is ensuring that if the stormwater system changes, that we want to make sure that we prioritize the lot coverage or impervious surface coverage standards. And I'm reading this and I'm trying to understand, but what I'm seeing, and I wonder if in the middle, the second line where we're listing out all of the types of residential development, if we can just eliminate most of that line, if we are to move forward with this and just say for all types of residential development. And I'm still, even with that elimination of 6-8 words, I'm still trying to wrap my head around getting down to the brass tacks of what is the intent.
If I could just remind that, so there was this, we did have a considerable conversation about the difference between lot coverage versus a new impervious surface standard. And so, and the city will be revising our stormwater standards based on our new MS4 permit that project's already underway to some degree and will be likely resulting in future changes to the code to implement. So I think they're recalling back to those deliberations. I think there was just some sentiment around efficient use of a lot. You know, I don't know exactly. So I'm sorry, I can't provide more clarification.
Commissioner Buck, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to comment?
You know, I was just going to say that I know that there had been significant discussion around the impervious surface piece, but I think that comments by Commissioner Bergen as well as Mark kind of covered that. It seemed to me that what stood out to me when I read through that is that's really the important piece is that, but it sounds like through other changes, this is going to resurface in the future. So I'm wondering if maybe this is best left till then, and just kind of leaving it as, you know, maximizing efficient use of lot area, because I think that we are going to see this particular issue again based on what Mark just said.
Commissioner Cuevola.
Yes, again, I'm still confused by the concept, so I would recommend deleting it at the present time.
And Commissioner Salazar?
I agree with Commissioners Cuevola and Buck. I think we can remove this item, the efficient use of lot area item, knowing that this is going to come up before us again soon. And in terms of the other item on this slide, I would prefer option 2. I think we've done a good job of smithing the pieces that we like from option 1 into that. And I think option 2 covers it all.
Other input on his last comment? I think the proposal is on homeownership to eliminate paragraph 1.
Yeah, I think Christina's probably switching to the Word document now of the order language itself. So this is kind of the consolidated version of everything you just talked about, Christina.
Yes, this is the consolidated version of everything that you've talked about. I worded your draft motion as replacing the bullet points with the following here so that you don't need specific language to remove the efficient use of lot area that I think most of you were in favor of not including. So we can continue making changes on this document now that everything is sort of whittled down. If there are other changes you want to make, I will give you a minute to read that for yourselves, just to make sure I've captured what you intended for me to capture on this.
Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. This is a small item just for sake of consistency in bullet points. In bullet point 2, systems development charges, not capitalized, and bullet point 4, it is capitalized. So it doesn't matter to me which we go with, just as long as it's consistent between the two.
Okay, I will fix that. I am going to see how it is referenced in the municipal code and whether it is capitalized there. It is not capitalized when we refer to it in the municipal code, so I will uncapitalize it here.
Okay. Are we ready for a motion to adopt the supplemental recommendation? Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. I move to adopt the supplemental recommendation in the agenda packet as attachment 1 for this item, with the changes written before us on this Word document.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, I'll call for the votes. Landon, yay. Commissioner Salazar,
Aye.
Commissioner Koivula,
Yes.
Commissioner Gill,
Aye.
Commissioner Bergen,
Aye.
Commissioner McGinley,
Aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Okay, the vote is unanimous. Motion carries.
I missed who seconded that. Who did the second? Commissioner Quayle, thanks.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have a report on city council meeting? Reminder, by the way, on the Springfield website, it has the listing of the meetings they're assigned. Any other business from members of the Planning Commission? Commissioner McGinley.
Thank you, Chair. Today, the proposed rules for climate-friendly and equitable communities rulemaking were posted on the Secretary of State webpage, and the Land Conservation and Development Commission will be voting on them March 31st and April 1st.
Thank you. Any other business from members of the Planning Commission?
Do you have a link for that, Commissioner McGinley, you could put in the chat?
Definitely. I can send it to Sandy to send out to the commission.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I still see hands up for Commissioner Koivula. Do you have any other? Okay, your voice also disappeared. Any business from the department, from the Development and Public Works Department?
Yes, you've all been working very hard and I applaud your efforts. And not because of that, but I think it is just coincidental. We don't have any agenda items for your next meeting. We had so many public comments on the Main Street safety plan that staff have asked for longer to be able to address those comments before preparing your packet for deliberation. So we do not have any agenda items for your meeting on the 15th. So your next meeting, scheduled meeting, is April 5th, Tuesday, April 5th. Commissioner Koivula?
Yes, I really wanted to say thank you to all the members of the commission for this marathon task of the code updates. And also say to the newer commissioners that 1,150, 1,200 page documents are not the rule there. And this has been a pretty unusual situation. So hopefully we'll have some nice, easy little cell towers or something in the future to decide on.
All right, I adjourn the Planning Commission meeting. Thank you, everybody. Sandy, any parting shots?